welcome. Thank you everyone for joining the next episode of Minerva PLM TV. I'm Jennifer Moore, your host, and I have with me today a very special guest, Peter Bilello. Peter, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Me as well. Peter, of course, I know you work for CIMdata, but why don't we start out just by sharing with those who don't know you a little bit about who you are, your background, and how you got started in PLM.
Sure. It's a long, sordid history, of course, as most things are, but I currently am the president and CEO of CIMdata, with management consulting firm. Been with the organization about 23 years now, a little over 23 years. But I have actually been in and around the product lifecycle management market most of my industrial career. So almost since leaving college, joined an automotive company, actually General Motors, and got involved fairly early on in my career there around design type of solutions, manufacturing solutions, and then data management solutions, which really were kind of the earlier stages of product data management back in the 1980s and then moving into the early 1990s. And I actually had responsibility for, at the time, Delphi Automotive, which was at the time a division of General Motors. It was actually about a $25 billion company at the time. And I was responsible for their engineering IT strategy, which ended up having a core element of product data management and, investigating, understanding on how that all brought together into the C4 program, which was part of General Motors. And their C4 program was CAD, CAM, CAE, and SIM. And it had a data management aspect of it with CAD data management, but didn't have a full product data management aspect that moved into the product structure, change management, and others, which are kind of still the core of product lifecycle management today. And then moved into CIMdata, where I continue to work with industrial companies around the world and also many solution providers throughout the world, and helping them understand what PLM is, what it could be, and as part of CIMdata, defining what it should be as well, and kind of broadening out the market and making sure people are aware of it and the value that it provides.
Excellent. That's really great. And in terms of what it should be and what it could be, you actually wrote a paper not too long ago titled, "Why is PLM so hard?"
Yes, yes.
And of course, my first question from that is really, why is it?
Yeah, so there's a number of factors that go on. I mean, the first one, kind of going back from the history point of view of these data management solutions, currently the early data management solutions that have become PDM, which are kind of the core of PLM, came from engineers and developed by engineers. And in kind of the habit of engineers is over-engineering as well. It's trying to make perfect solutions to do every kind of known situation possible. And as a result of over-engineering, they can become more complex. Absolutely. And because they're defined by engineers for engineers, that's great for engineers, but a lot of the users today of lifecycle management solutions are well beyond engineering, and so they're more difficult for them to use. They haven't been engineered for their use. And kind of the third reason is that we tend to try to implement these solutions, and maybe it's a habit that we have from an IT perspective, not just a PLM perspective, but to implement technologies in the way we do things today. Without taking advantage of changing the way we do things in a better way, in a more innovative way, or allowing the technology to support things that we could not do in a paper world, but we can do in an electronic world. So again, they're more difficult than they should be because we've tried to automate things in a way that wasn't natural for automation, for example. So those are kind of the three major areas that I would say is kind of the history of it, and the fact that it was made for engineers by engineers, and then over-engineering that as a result of that, and then our need to really think differently has not been encouraged at times, and we've really tried to implement the old way of working, but in new technology, which again has made it more difficult.
Certainly. So two of those points that you just mentioned, the first being we often over-engineer PLM, and the second being that we're implementing a process as it is today, whatever that process may be enabled by, whether it's other systems or paper-based or whatever. Can you expand a little bit on these 2 points and why that's really an issue? I mean, I understand it makes it a little bit more difficult for the users to be able to use it, but whenever you're thinking about, PLM and the many different parts of an organization and business processes and products and all of these things that it touches, isn't there a bit of over-engineering that's obvious?
Well, I think you first have to kind of step back from it, and you look at PLM as, CIMdata likes to say it, it's a strategic business approach. And if you really look at it from an enterprise view, lifecycle management, product lifecycle management. So concept through end of life or through life, depending on if it's a circular economy or not.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to really enable the life cycle, that means getting the right products to the market in the right way at the right time. I mean, it's a holistic end-to-end view. So it's a life cycle way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm going to go engineer that, I have to look at the big picture. Because if I don't look at the big picture, I'm going to sub-optimize. I mean, it's almost a natural thing of doing it. So again, the systems that were historically built for engineering, optimized for engineering because that's what they were used. But now lifecycle management is not an engineering discipline; it's a lifecycle discipline, which means it's an enterprise discipline. So without that enterprise view, that end-to-end connectivity and optimization, you're going to sub-optimize, and that's really kind of the issue that most people run into. And the reason why they run into it is, one, they don't have the ability to see it from a life cycle perspective because there's no ownership.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of a problem with the way organizations are run, the way we educate, management and non-management as well. I mean, I did an article recently with someone interview, and he ended up describing the article, and the title was PLM has a lot to do with something to the effect, a lot to do with the Roman Empire. And his point was, and my point was, is that the way we manage our businesses are based on a division of labor for the most part, right? It's a pyramid.
Right.
And a division of labor where we structure, operations over here, engineering over here, manufacturing operations, but marketing, and we have these silos. And that's all, understandable from a division of labor point of view. And also there's disciplines you go underneath engineering, you have optics and you have electronics, you have mechanics and so on. But in the world, that's fine if you deal with these things as separate entities. But if I'm really trying to optimize and get the most return on investment, I have to optimize from an end-to-end perspective. But that means I have to have ownership. But if my management is, I only care about operations, or I only care about engineering or whatever, and I don't have either visibility or measurements, or if someone's not measured to go do something or not paid to go do it, they're not going to go do it unless they just happen to be nice people. But we don't have that luxury in most organizations. We have to do what we're paid to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that division of labor, I mean, it easily goes back to the Roman legions. Legions were structured in a way which provided discipline and communication structure, which continues today in military for the most part. And most organizations have that top-down way of communicating in a division of labor. So if we engineer that way, and now I say we develop systems that go support that old way of thinking,
mm-hmm.
we're going to sub-optimize again. And there's a thing called a theory of constraints.
Mm-hmm.
The theory of constraints it's been historically used in manufacturing, but it says if I'm going to have a flow of material, and think about it as any kind of process, including an information process, its overall end-to-end value and end-to-end productivity, however you want to describe it, or throughput, will be based on where the constraints are.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm operating a piece of equipment and only can do 1 part per minute, and everything else can do 3 parts per minute, well, the constraint is that 1 part per minute. Let's assume they're all the same parts. So that's where I put my money. If I put my money in those other machines that are running faster, it doesn't really matter because I'll never catch up.
Right.
So from a PLM perspective, a life cycle perspective, it's the same thing. If I want to maximize my return on investment, which is really what a company should think of PLM as, where do I put my money? What do I enable to make sure that I have the right product at the right time, to the right market, at the right cost, the right level of quality, the right level of functionality, and so
mm-hmm.
on. And I'll go to one other level beyond that, even within engineering as a system. So if you're building a product as a system, I have to optimize across those systems in a similar way.
Mm-hmm.
You get the right match of capabilities and features and quality, and so to get the right product out. But that product doesn't exist by itself. It exists within the company, within the supply chain, within the service channel, within the manufacturing operation. So those are all systems as well. So you can kind of, again, stepping back from it all and say life cycle is about optimization from an end-to-end perspective across disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do I do that? Well, I have to step back from it. I can't just take a narrow view, and I can't say, oh, I'll do it the way of, so going back to your original question, how do I do this? Going back to just implementing the old way. Well, I implement the old way, I'm not going to have that end-to-end perspective that I need to have.
Mm-hmm.
Now that usually means 3 aspects of change, right? People, processes, and technologies. So I can go put a new PLM solution in place, the technology, I should adjust the processes, but the organizational structure may need to change as well.
Mm-hmm.
And to give that visibility to those that are hopefully then made responsible from an end-to-end perspective, which then they can rationalize and put the right emphasis in the right places to ultimately get that best return on investment from an end-to-end perspective.
Right. And I'm sure some people, whenever they're thinking about how they're going to address what they know the problems are and whatnot, they're thinking, well, if I start with the process that I have today, then I don't have to retrain my people. We're just digitizing the current process. And maybe that's some form of trying to keep it simple. And actually, I have your paper up here, and you do bring up a really good point where you say a company's PLM solution must be implemented to enable the enterprise and its entire user community to do their work in the simplest manner possible. Very much akin to what you just described a few moments ago. But going deeper into that and this idea of simplicity, you know, what is simple and how can a company start to pursue it? Is it by digitalizing their current process, or is there some other factor that really is simplification?
Yeah, it's a great set of questions, really. They're kind of fundamental to how we evolve or how we transform. So we talk a lot about digital transformation or transformation in general. And you know, one of the problems with just digitizing or digitalizing what you've already done, you'll get stuck there. Now, but you have to think about, how do I transition? Because it's not about just flipping a switch generally. Because as you said, you know, the organization has to be able to digest it, adopt it, and adapt to it. So, you know, making it simple is, how do I take the steps that are transparent, you know, understood, but that people can understand where they're going as well. So it's like, you know, stepping back and saying, this is our destination. This is the new world that we want to get to. But then how do I take practical steps that keeps it simple, that allows people to work in the way they're comfortable in? Because most people don't really work in a PLM solution. This PLM solution is more kind of the process and data management enabler. And a lot of that should be reasonably transparent. It's the applications that sit on top of that. Some of those applications are within that PLM platform. Some will be connected to the platform.
Sure.
Maybe they're going to mainly work in Word or Excel, or there may be some other applications that are kind of MRO applications that are embedded in the platform. But it's some application that's sitting on top of it or bolted to it in some way. So if they can keep it simple by working within the environments that they do most of their work. Data management itself is an overhead. I mean, kind of fundamentally, it's overhead. But if you don't manage the data, good luck trying to make sure it's correct.
You have to do it.
You have to do it. So I often talk about PLM as the wires in the wall. So I'm going to go design a house or a building or whatever. There's all kinds of infrastructure that has to be put into place. But unless I'm using it, it's just cost. So data management, the core of PLM is data management, process management in many cases. That's the wires in the wall. It's the infrastructure. So keep that as transparent as possible. It's another way of keeping it simple. Getting people to work as much as you can into their natural tools that they use to add value. Let data management be as best you can, again, transparent. Don't force people. I mean, I've seen this in the past where people need a bunch of documents and they work and they compare them and they do different things. But then the PLM system says, well, you can only have one document open at a time. And you got to check it out, check it in, and do all this overhead. Now, again, the data management is necessary, but that doesn't mean you have to make it all required by that person. Some of that can be naturally done as they work within their tool. Some of it can be done, you know, just totally automated. Again, keeping it simple. So we'll go back to kind of the second part of your question about simple. Some of that I've already described, but simple in many ways is in the eyes of the beholder, right? What's simple to you and I may be different than someone that's not used to PLM,
right,
or not used to data management for that matter. So again, you want them to work in their environment that they're most comfortable with. So if they're an artist and they work in, let's say, an Adobe tool like Illustrator, well, how can you embed the check-in, check-out, or the data management aspects and the workflow aspects within their tool, or within Microsoft Outlook, in their email system, for example, and those types of things that keep it simple to them. It may be different than how you would keep it simple to an engineer that's used to building, well, they're kind of used to building bills of materials within Excel, which is, not a bad tool. It's a good tool for personal productivity, but maybe not for the enterprise, for example. But how do you, again, maybe give them capabilities from the look and feel, maybe very simple, but also in a way that they're used to using it. So it's a table, and it could be And there's some good examples there where people can be within Excel. I'll just use Excel as an example, or any kind of spreadsheet. And there's integrations where you're working within that tool and the data is actually being managed by cell behind the scenes within the PLM solution.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the ways to keep it simple. But it's from a user perspective more so than anything. And that there may be different personas that you have to keep it simple for.
Okay. So you've really already started to talk about a lot of the considerations that you should take in whenever you're thinking about moving forward. Who is the user persona? You know, what are the tools that they use that are simple to them already? What are some other things that implementation teams can think about or apply to make sure that they make the implementation as simple as possible?
Well, first thing is, I just briefly mentioned this a while, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes ago or so, but stepping back from it, understanding the destination, because it's a journey. You'll never get to the destination, by the way, because businesses change. You know, the consistent one thing consistent in life. There's a couple of things, like death and taxes, of course, but the third one is change.
Yes.
You know, in our current situation, COVID-19 has changed a lot of people's thinking about collaboration, data management, working from home, all those things. So we know, you know, change happens all the time, no matter what. So they have to but they have to figure out, where do I want to go today, and put that in change, because that
have a vision.
Have a vision, and have that vision broad enough that will, and associated with the business. It's not a vision of PLM per se, it's a vision for the business, and then understand how PLM fits that. And then step back from it and say, okay, so how do I get there? What is the step? So I always use an example like this. I want to get to Rome. All right, so I know it's east, but I can go west and get to Rome.
You could.
Now, it's faster to go east from where I live in the US, but I can go west. I've done around the world trips east and west. So I know I can get around the world either way. But it's also maybe, okay, what mode of transportation do I want to take? You know, what stops do I want to take? You know, can I take a nonstop or not if I want to take an airplane? So it starts to be, you know, your destination, but how do I want to get there? And then, you know, there's other constraints like budget. And then there's the going back to your comment earlier about what can the company digest, and keeping it simple is also keeping it digestible. So what pieces, right? What implementation pieces can I take it in that keeps it digestible as I go through that vision that journey to get to that vision. So that's another aspect that's really important, and continue to look back at it. Is that vision still correct? Am I getting into going in the right direction or not? And taking these in digestible chunks that, one, show that I'm making progress, and show measurable returns on investment, because that is also something that gets people to be excited and understand. When I see the vision still, I see how we can get there. I see that we're making progress, and there's benefits involved with it. So, you know, driving for simplicity has to be part of kind of that whole picture and how we're working through this, because you don't want to have any kind of, I want to boil the ocean kind of theory that's out, or perspective that some people might have, and say, no, we're not trying to boil the ocean. We're trying to boil this pot first, and then this other pot first, and this second, and then third, and so on. At the end of the day, we'll get to where we need to be, whatever scope that's appropriate, because my scope and my company may be different to my competitor, depending on my business strategy and other aspects of it. So, you know, simplicity is going to evolve as well, but it will be known when you see it, and but you have to keep track of it as you do, or you will probably make it overly complex. And one other comment on simplicity is, you're always better off putting out a minimal viable product that's truly minimal but viable, and adding to it, than trying to do everything up front, or over engineering it. Because to make something that's complex simple is much harder than making something that's simple complex. Now, both have to be avoided. But the first one will allow you, you know, making something simple, then you can add complexity, or I would say features, as you should, that continue to provide value. And there was a quote I recently saw, and I forget what it was or who it was, but it was something to the effect that complex systems usually don't start out complex. They become complex.
That's a very good point.
Yeah,
because you start
simple,
kind of small and simple, and then all of a sudden it just.
Yeah, it's like no, it was something like, you know, no complex systems start complex, whatever. So it's important that both, one, we start simple and add if required, when required, based upon value.
Right.
But that means we start with something that's simple to begin with, and then we make sure that we continue to have it simple. And one of the big pushes in PLM has been, this reason and comments around customization.
Mm-hmm.
Now, CIMdata has used the definition for decades that customization is something that every time you upgrade, you have to re-customize. And I'm going to go with that definition. Now, there's some solutions out there which you can highly configure.
Sure.
And you still can upgrade. And some, I would even argue, you can make custom applications on top of it, on top of the platform, for example, and you can still upgrade the platform. And those are, to me, the ones that are going to survive, the ones that are the real enterprise platforms. There's others, though, that I would call instant legacy. It's almost no matter what you configure, it's a legacy solution.
Right.
But then there's others that are kind of in the middle that you can make into legacy solutions by customizing it to the point where you have to re-customize each time.
Yeah.
That's not simple anymore, and those have to be avoided.
So you mentioned a lot of really great points there with stepping back, understanding your vision, knowing where you want to go, keeping it agile, giving people incremental use cases that provide value. And I love that statement about providing value. But some people would argue with you that to truly keep it simple, you shouldn't have a vision and you should narrow your scope way down.
Yeah.
Do you think that's dangerous territory, or do you think there are times where that does make sense?
I think if you have no destination in mind, you'll never probably end up where you need to be. This is a loss of,
like Alice in Wonderland. If you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter which road you take.
That's right. I mean, it's like I said to someone, here, take my car keys and call me when you get there. And then take it. I said, drive 100 miles. I don't care. Drive 100 kilometers, whatever it is. Then call me up. What's the odds are you where you want you to be? Well, you didn't tell me. Well, that's a problem for me, but it's also a problem for you.
Yeah.
So having vision, again, under change control, as I said before, is critical because a company needs to be enabled. The company's not a good company is not sitting there without defining who they are. Now, some companies do that better than others, of course, but it's about, again, what's your missions and vision as a company and how does PLM enable that? That's that linkage which should not be separated. And that sets your vision then for product lifecycle management and what it means. But then being able to parse that into something, again, that's digestible. What are those minimal viable product steps? What is the streams I can take, implementation streams I can take to get there so that I'm developing within that right context? Because there's only, the only time you should, how should I say this? Only time an IT system is finished is when you shut it off. Because IT systems, what do? They support the business and the business processes.
And
generally they change. Right. And you think about, some people say, well, I have regulations. Well, yeah, but regulations change as well. They may not. So you're changing because your customers want force change. Your company wants change. Regulations, third parties and their kind of customers in a way want change. So the IT systems that's supporting that or the enablers behind that are going to have to change as well. So again, that's how you have to think about it and understand that I need to look for what I'm trying to accomplish, move towards that as appropriate, and not lose track of it. And if I just go off, and this is kind of, some people complain about Agile, say, well, Agile, you don't need to plan for Agile. Well, that's just wrong. Agile is a way that you iterate, right? So, I've seen companies do it, right? I'm sure you've seen it as well.
I've seen it, but you still need to plan.
Yeah, you have to. Now, you don't have to go to a waterfall level of detail.
No.
Right? The short-term things, build out that the backlog and everything of the user stories and stuff, and define the broad and underpinning of the environment up front, but then build on that over time. But you're building on that as the vision, because if I set the data model up in such a narrow view, or again, it may depend on the solution I have, I may have to re-engineer that data model constantly.
Right.
So I may have to, depending on the solution now, I may have to do more work there. Now, if I have a more flexible solution, which allows me to add relationships more easily and it's, upgradable and stuff, well, I can do that a little bit differently. I won't have to do as much of that. I may have to do any kind of overall planning for the data model, but I still have to do overall planning of how I want to accomplish or what's kind of the major steps I want to take to navigate from current state to future state.
Right. That makes perfect sense to me. And, Peter, this has been really great. I totally appreciate your time. Are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, one of the things I've, kind of been promoting is getting people to think the big picture. And I think it's really important, big picture, what was PLM trying to accomplish? And ultimately, as I said before, it's trying to accomplish end-to-end optimization and connectivity. So we talk about digital transformation. A lot of people within that context talk about digital twins and digital threads and other things. And I want people to realize that product lifecycle management, that strategic business approach, is critical to people's transformations, not just digital transformations, but that's applying technology, but it's also process transformation, organizational transformation. So it's it's not boiling the ocean. It's an important factor. It's one of a number of important factors, but it's not just an engineering solution. It is an enterprise solution. It's a way of thinking, this life cycle mindset and optimization mindset that's important. So I would ask as PLM professionals to think broader, perhaps, than they have in the past, and get management involved, and hopefully continue to get them to understand the bigger picture as well, because that's what they want. They want to maximize their return on investment. And we have different times. I've been through a couple of recessions, and not including what we might be in now, but previous ones, and in the PLM space. And usually PLM still moves forward because there's value in it to the business itself. And the last recession, it was about doing more with less. And we may have a period of time there as well, but it's doing more in many areas. More complex products, more complex supply chains, and doing it smart. I'm not talking about getting rid of people. I'm talking about utilizing the knowledge that we have and the knowledge that other workers will bring to us in the best way possible, so that we can have a more multiplying effect of what lifecycle management's all about. So that's what I would like to leave your listeners and viewers for, with that, those thoughts in mind.
Totally agree with you there, Peter. Thank you so much for your time. I certainly appreciate it. Hope to have you back again in the future. And until then, keep those great papers coming. Look forward to learning more from you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for joining us. We really appreciate the opportunity to share lots of insight and information with you about running technology projects and making them more successful in your organization, no matter what type of technology project you're doing. Liked this content? Make sure to hit that button and subscribe. And of course, drop your comments or send me an email at jmo@minerva-plm.com about any questions that you have that you'd like to see addressed here. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.